Ever wonder why employers ask you what your salary expectations are when it's them looking to hire? Well, today I'm pulling back the curtain on what's really going on and showing you how to tailor your response, whether you're speaking to an internal recruiter, an agency recruiter, or even a company director. Now, I've worked as an agency recruiter and have been a company director for over 10 years, so I've literally seen every salary negotiation tactic in the book. And hey, I'll hold my hands up and admit I've used a few of them too. I can tell you, if you don't manage these conversations correctly, you could either end up getting lowballed or worse still, ruled out completely. So by the end of this video, you'll know how to respond no matter who you're dealing with and how to stay in control of the conversation every step of the way. So let's start with the big question. Why do recruiters or employers in general even ask about your salary expectations in the first place? I mean, if they've got a role to fill and a budget to work with, shouldn't they already know what they're willing to pay? Well, the answer isn't always as straightforward as you might think, because it really depends on who you're talking to. So internal recruiters, agency recruiters, and decision makers like directors or CEOs all approach this question differently, and understanding their motivations is key to handling it in the right way. So let me break it down for you. So first up, internal recruiters. So these guys are the talent acquisition team who work directly for the employers. Now, their job is to find candidates who fit within the company requirements, and you guessed it, one of those requirements will be the financial budget. Now, let's be honest, they're trying to find the best people, but hey, they're going to look good if they can do that while also saving the company some money, right? So if they're asking you about your salary expectations early on, it's likely because they're trying to figure out if you're within their budget or if they'll need to lowball you to make it work. Then there are agency recruiters, which I used to be. Now, they're different because they're typically paid on commission, meaning the higher your salary, the more they earn. But don't be fooled into thinking that they're throwing money around. Now, how could they? They're working on behalf of their clients, and well, it's not their money. Yes, they'll want to maximize things for you because that means that they're maximizing their commission. But hey, the smart ones out there will try to anchor you to a lower range early on. Now, you might be thinking, well, why? So let's talk about that, because this catches a lot of people off guard. Now, here's the thing. Recruiters aren't stupid. They know that candidates often inflate their salary expectations. And you've probably heard, or maybe even said, the classic line, hey, the more money I get paid, the more money you get paid, right? Now, while that's technically true, there's one big factor most people overlook: the if. Now, if the recruiter can actually get you the highest salary you're asking for, then yes, they'll make more commission. But, and this is the part most people miss, there's also a risk if pushing for that higher figure creates too much back and forth and leads to either you or the client walking away, the whole deal falls apart. Now, when I worked on the agency side, I saw this all the time. For example, if a candidate was ideally shooting for 120k, but told the recruiter anything from 90k to 100k was okay, the recruiter had to make a choice. Did they risk losing the placement arguing for the extra 20k, or did they look to close the deal quickly and take the guaranteed finder's fee? Now, that's typically 25 to 30% of that 100k salary. Now, 9 times out of 10, the recruiter is going to choose the deal because, let's face it, we're all very much risk averse, and spending weeks or months trying to find another candidate for the same role isn't worth the headache. So to maintain control, be transparent about the bottom line and hold strong. Now, of course, if you want more in-depth support with your entire job search, including how to maximize your interviews and salary negotiation, you should take a look at my Career Growth Accelerator program, where I've helped hundreds of clients add up to 100k to their salary with one single move. So I'll pop a link in the description below. And finally, let's talk about dealing with decision makers, people like hiring managers, directors, and CEOs. Now, I've sat on this side of the table too, and as a founder and a director, it's more about whether they see you as a worthwhile investment. Now, they'll often have more flexibility, but they still want to know that you can produce. Now, after all, it's them you're going to be working with, and often them who are going to be paying your wages. Well, certainly if you're dealing with a director or the CEO of a smaller or mid-sized company. So don't be fluffy. Now, when these guys ask you what your salary expectation is, you're better to be direct. Now, that doesn't mean that you need to buckle under pressure and give them a figure. It just means you need to speak with clarity. And this should be the case across the board. Now, sure, you might get a bit more leeway when dealing with recruiters, but mistake number one is being too vague or evasive. Now, I'll have people tell me that they never give a response and they just say something like, I'm flexible, or I'm looking for the market rate. But come on. All this does is tell the recruiter or employer that you're either desperate and will accept anything, or that you have absolutely no idea what you're talking about. And not only that, but when you do this, you only end up frustrating them. Now, if you're dealing with an agency recruiter, don't panic. It's totally okay to talk figures. Actually, it helps. And if you're too vague or don't give them a figure, it's likely that they'll just side with someone who has. Now, think about it. Let's say that there is a client who has an urgent requirement for an IT project manager and they're paying 100K. And that week, they've spoke to 5 different IT project managers, one of whom was looking for more like 200K, 3 gave expectations in a range of 90 to 120K, while the final person didn't want to give any indication at all. Now, who do you think they'll be calling first? I know for sure where I'd be focusing. I'd give the 200K guy a miss because it would be a waste of my time and his, and I'd skip the guy who didn't give a range because I might be wasting my time there too. Instead, I get straight on to the 3 possible candidates who seem to fit the criteria. Now, I get it, you don't want to say the wrong thing, but that's why it's important to know who you're dealing with and the role that they play. Now, if it's early on in the process and they ask, what are your salary expectations? It's better to show you're thoughtful and strategic rather than giving a personal number. And that makes mistake number 2, by the way. Now, sure, if you're dealing with agency recruiters, you can talk figures, but with internal recruiters and employers directly, you should never be the first to talk numbers. Now, if you set the bar too high, you can take yourself out the running. And if you go too low, well, you risk lowballing yourself, which is never advisable. Okay, so how do you do all of this? Well, particularly when it feels like you're being pushed. Well, that's where your research comes in. So use websites like Glassdoor or salary.com, and you need to understand an approx range through your market research. You want to say something like, well, I've been considering various options and there seems to be a fair range on offer from companies. And at this point, you should state a wide range that you've researched. So highlight how you've seen things from as low as whatever, right up to, and then state a much higher figure. Now, this keeps things broad, and then follow on from that by saying something like, I'm curious, since this is an approved position, how does your range compare? Now, it's worth practicing this because the way you deliver this response and your tone of voice will play a huge part, but let me tell you why this works. The curiosity-based response avoids anchoring yourself into a specific number and shifts the focus back to the recruiter or employer to share their range. And it also allows you to politely say, hey, I've seen employers offering anything from pocket change up to 6 figures with full benefits and a corner office, and you're going to need to let me know where you are on that scale. Okay, so this is all about positioning yourself as informed and professional. Now, it's also your way of saying you're staying flexible without being evasive. So that's that covered. But here's where you need to pay close attention and make sure you don't make mistake number 3, letting recruiters dictate the conversation. So now you've got a solid understanding of why salary expectations come up. You need to be aware that sometimes employers may use specific tactics to anchor you to a lower figure and test your flexibility. Let's talk about some of these tactics and how they work, and more importantly, how you can handle them like a pro. So let me paint a picture for you. You're already past the screening call and the recruiter casually says, we've got a lot of strong candidates for this role, so we want to make sure your expectations align with our budget. Sounds harmless, right? But this is what's called an anchoring tactic. Now, they're trying to set your expectations lower without directly saying it. They're playing on your own FOMO, knowing that if you believe that there is more competition, you will be more inclined to share a more competitive effective rate. Alternatively, maybe you get something like, this is the salary range we're working with and it's non-negotiable. Now, whether or not that's actually true is a different story, because most of the time there's wiggle room for the right candidate. So how do you handle this without falling for the bait? Well, the first step is to stay calm and acknowledge what they've said, but don't let these tactics make you feel pressured or cornered. So for example, if they give you a low range and you never accept, don't ignore it and blindly move forward thinking that you can rectify things once the offer comes in, because by that time it's already too late. Your silence will have been treated as acceptance. So instead, you need to strike while the iron is hot and say something like, thanks for letting me know, although from my discussions about similar roles, that range seems a bit low compared to the market. I'd be looking for something more, insert range, and then ask, is that going to be completely out of reach? Now that way, you're acknowledging their input, but still steering the conversation in a way that keeps your value front and center. And hey, you might even want to flip that FOMO element to the recruiter by adding something like, if that's completely out of reach, should we call it a day and wish each other the best? Now this is a bold move, but what it politely says to the recruiter is, I'm good at what I do, and if you can't afford me, I'll take my experience and skills to someone else who can. And guess what? That won't happen too often, and all of a sudden the recruiter will be thinking, oh my God, this person knows their stuff. Let's see what we can do. So this little trick can be a game changer. And when I was a recruiter, I once had a guy who did exactly this with one of my clients and ended up securing a salary that was double, yes, double what the client initially stated. Now, another good thing to do once you've responded is redirect the conversation back to the role itself. So after you get hit with a curveball relating to pay, you could say something like, hey, if none of what you've said is a complete deal breaker, I'm confident we can find something that works for both of us if we decide that this is the right fit. But for now, I'd love to focus on the role itself and how I can bring value to your team. Can you tell me more about, and then ask something about the role in general. Now, this keeps the spotlight on your skills and the opportunity rather than just the paycheck. And at the end of the day, recruiters might use these tactics to test you, but if you know how to play the game better than they do, you'll be fine. And the key is to stay calm and confident and always keep the conversation moving forward. Now, if this video gave you clarity, let me know in the comments what's been your biggest challenge with salary discussions. Now, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who needs it. And if you haven't already, check out my free LinkedIn optimization tutorial here. I'll see you there.